Hello everyone, my name is Maria and I am from Sweden. So my last name is Sundberg Stuxgren. And who am I? Well, I'm a nail tech. I have been for almost 20 years and I've been doing a lot of stuff in the nail industry. Doing nails at the salon for many hours and years. I've been competing, I've been judging, I've been helping with product development, but mostly what I have enjoyed is to teach. So in 2012 people asked me to compose what I used to say in the classroom in a book, and I did. And then after a couple of years people suggested that why don't you translate it to English. So I started that work, but it has been a long process because during that time I also decided I wanted to expand and learn more and go to university. So I am currently also studying to become a dentist. I have done 4 out of 5 years and I've had 2 kids. So there's been a lot of action, but I am almost finished with the book, and it looks like this. And it's called Nail Therapist, an Occupational Guide. And I jokingly say that it's everything up to the flower, like all the basic understanding that you need to have, that many students and teachers for that matter think is kind of boring and just something that you have to get done in order to get to the fun part. But I like it. I like to be a nerd. I like to understand how things work and why. So I've tried to, in a fun and comprehensive way, describe all of that in the book. So it's everything from anatomy to hygiene to how to interact with clients, to how to make a budget, to chemicals at the salon, to working safely, allergies, how to protect yourself, and then of course everything from making manicure and nail extensions and all of that as well. And some people that read the preview version have been approaching me and saying that why don't you do a video to explain a little bit about nail anatomy that some people may need to repeat or perhaps never learned in the first place. And there's also some exciting new research that make us have to rename some of the structures of the nail apparatus. So this is not only about having the anatomical knowledge, it's also about how to apply it. Because today people are doing a rough sort of new manicure that removes a lot of living tissue from the nail apparatus and then a proximal nail fold. And that may look very pretty on photos, and we all know that we live in a day and age where social media and sites like Pinterest and Instagram is important, and you want to attract a lot of followers and a lot of likes. But I don't believe that you should do that by compromising the health of the natural nail. So I thought I would give a quick rerun on the nail anatomy. And I decided to use some props to make it a little bit more fun. So this piece of thin bread will illustrate the nail plate. And you must imagine that my arm is bone, which it is in here, and the overlying tissue. And the nail plate adheres to this thin epithelial layer of the nail bed. And you have the matrix area here and also here that produces the new nail cells. And as the nail cells divide in the matrix area, the new cells push the older ones forward, like this, hence creating nail growth. And this area here is the proximal nail fold. And you have a skin that goes on top, like this. So this is another sandwich, and this will illustrate the proximal nail fold. So you have the skin here, the epidermis, the outermost layer of the skin, and you have the proximal nail fold here, and you have the nail plate here. But we're missing a part, aren't we? Yes, we're missing the cuticle. And this little structure here we used to refer to as the eponychium. But new research have shown that this is actually not the eponychium. The eponychium is actually a thin layer of cells illustrated by the butter here at the underside of the proximal nail fold, and they produce the cuticle. And I've chosen to illustrate the cuticle with this piece of cheese. Okay, so you have the nail plate and you have the cuticle here, and it is produced by a thin cell layer illustrated by the butter that's called the eponychium. So the eponychium sheds the cuticle. Okay, so it looks like this. You have the nail plate, you have the cheese or the cuticle, and you have the proximal nail fold. So the cheese, once it is visible here, you really don't have any use for it anymore. Its use is to adhere the proximal nail fold here and act almost like a double-sided sticky tape. And once it has passed here, you don't really need it. So what you can do is you can scrape it away, as you do during a manicure or a prep for making artificial nails. This is not a living tissue. Okay, so I can remove some cheese and eat it up. Now, I wouldn't eat cuticle, but it isn't living. I'm not a cannibal, so I can eat it. However, this part is still living. I cannot nibble on it because it's living and it will cause it to bleed. And also, it's very important to remember that the skin is the first line of defense against microorganisms such as virus and bacteria. So you need to keep it intact. Cutting it or abrading it away is not keeping it intact. So what you're doing is that you're penetrating or damaging the first line of defense of your body, and you shouldn't do that. So this area here, we have two issues with it. First, what do you call it? If we can't call it the eponychium anymore, we have to call it something. And it is a band. It's a band of living tissue, and it belongs to the proximal nail fold. So I have chosen to call it the proximal epidermal band of the proximal nail fold, and I have abbreviated it to the T-BOP. And if that catches on or not, I do not know, but I will refer to it to the T-BOP in this video in order to call it something. So the T-BOP is an area that we all come into contact with on a daily basis when we treat our clients. So what can you do with it? Well, you can groom it and you can gently care for it, but you cannot damage it. So you can use a pusher or something like that and gently push it a little bit backwards in order to more easily get access to the cheese or the cuticle and remove it. And here, if you have something like this, like a hangnail or a little piece of dead tissue that's sticking up, that is hard, you can gently groom it. In some countries, you can use a cuticle nipper to gently remove dead area sticking up. In some countries, you're not even allowed to use a nipper. So what you can use instead is perhaps some oil and a buffer to gently remove if there are some rough areas. But the important thing is to keep it healthy and use things like lotions and oils to care for it and not remove it. So what people do sometimes is that they use a cuticle nipper or some other tool, and they just basically remove the entire area. Now, it may look nice to have removed the crust or the T-BOP when you take photos, and it can help you to get closer to the skin when applying nail polish and nail construction products, but that is not good because one, you're not supposed to get that close to the skin because it can increase risks for allergies even if it looks nice on a photo. And also you have damaged the first line of defense, and that can cause an inflammation. And you can see that because the skin gets red and puffy and swollen, and it can also be very hurtful. And you are essentially opening the way to bacteria and viruses to just get in here, okay? And then they can eventually, if you have really bad luck, they can get in here and they can cause an infection, and that can damage the cells of the nail bed or the nail matrix, I'm sorry. And that can actually cause permanent damage if you aren't lucky. So you shouldn't do that. And what other people do is they use an e-file, or really harsh hand file, to remove the crust or the T-bob. Like this, chosen to illustrate this. Would you use this on your own skin? Oh, you wouldn't. No. Okay. So using an e-file to make like a Russian manicure, or whatever you want to call it, it's pretty much like doing this. You may be able to remove the crust or the T-bob, and it can look pretty, but you have actually damaged the skin and broken the first line of defense, and you do not want to do either of those things, because your job as a nail tech or a nail therapist, as I use the term, because I think that what we do is that we care for and treat the nail, and that's the meaning of the word therapist, and not damage it. So I think that we should be a little careful about the information that we get from online sources, and do some basic source checking first. Is this really a good practice? Should I be doing it? And that is also what I've been trying to do in the book. I've been very selective of my sources, and I have been reading a lot of scientific data and material to get as close to the truth as you can get. Things change, but it's important that you have facts. Today, one person's opinion or several persons' opinions can spread really quickly, as we have seen with this recent trend of these kinds of really invasive manicures, because people see them and they see that others do them and they want to do it too, and they look at videos and they go to classes and people instruct them, and perhaps they haven't reviewed their information on how infections spread and how inflammations are caused and how the nail anatomy works. So this is my my little video about this subject, and along with this video there will be some contact information if you want to ask some questions, or perhaps order my book or something of the kind. So thank you for listening, and take care, all of you nail folks out there. Bye bye.